Surprise, surprise, friends. Barry Bonds was not elected to the Hall of Fame, at least not by the writers. There are other avenues under which he could eventually get in, but this was his final year on the ballot thanks to, the Hall of Fame changing the rules about eligibility, which they did specifically to get guys like Bonds off the ballot sooner. It used to be you were eligible to receive votes for 15 years as long as you stayed above 5%, but they shortened it to 10, and this was Bonds' 10th and final year, and they didn't vote him in. So we're going to talk about how did this happen. I mean, I think we're going to just break it all down, talk about some of the crazy bonkers career numbers for Barry Bonds, and how it's just a shame that David Ortiz was able to get in on the first ballot and Bonds was not, even though Ortiz has some PED links himself. So all of that next on today's Locked On Giants.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide episodes 3 days a week for now, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites, Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, so please check us out there if you have not already. And coming up on today's show, we're forced to talk about the Hall of Fame, because yesterday was the announcement of the results, and for the 10th consecutive year, we have to sit here and think about how the writers got it wrong with Barry Bonds, in my opinion. The one thing I will say before I get too angry about this, and I mentioned it yesterday, 75% is a high bar to clear. People kind of joke about this, but it's true. These days, in particular, you really can't get 75% of people to agree on just about anything. So, I'm not going to get too upset. Like, at the end of the day, Bonds did get 66% of the vote. 2/3, basically, of voters voted for Bonds to get into the Hall of Fame. So credit to those 2/3 of voters. But the voters I have a problem with are the other 1/3. And there's another factor here. We've got people who publicly release their ballots and then people who do not. And for Barry Bonds, there's a huge discrepancy between on public ballots, he was on 77.6%. On private ballots, he was only on 53%. And so as I scroll through the difference, that appears to be the biggest gap between a negative gap between public ballots and private ballots. And so not only are they taking a stand against Bonds, but they're also hiding as they take a stand. And so on the one hand, I do get it. Like, they don't want to be attacked by angry Bond supporters. But on the other hand, I don't know. The whole thing has me completely jaded. That was kind of the overarching theme that I had yesterday when we were talking about all this, was that the Hall of Fame has left me as a Giants fan jaded. And, yesterday was the final straw. At least we can stop talking about this, I guess. Although he will be eligible to be voted in by these committees, and he's going to be eligible to be part of a vote that's going to be next winter in like December. I think there's 16 people on the committee, and he's going to have to get like 12 out of 16 votes. There's always going to be avenues for him to get in, but as it is now, I mean, the writers didn't get him in, and the reason I have a problem with this year in particular is because David Ortiz. First of all, congratulations to David Ortiz. I would have voted for David Ortiz if I had a vote. It is a crowded field. I may not have been able to fit him in because there's a lot of great players that were on the ballot. But David Ortiz, there's a PED connection. He reportedly tested positive in 2003. There are multiple legitimate sources that have reported that he did test positive in 2003. There's some question as to whether or not the substance that he tested positive for was banned at the time. And so I'll give him that. But there's also a question. And the thing is, with so many players in this era, we just don't know for sure. And the fact, like, okay, get him in eventually, great. But the fact that it's first ballot for David Ortiz and Bonds has to ride this thing out for 10 years only to be rejected for a 10th and final time, that just doesn't sit well with me, particularly because Barry Bonds was such a better baseball player than David Ortiz, steroids or not. As great as Ortiz was, Bonds was one of the best players of all time. Ortiz was not. Ortiz was a designated hitter, provided no defensive value, provided no base running value because he was not fleet of foot. Great hitter. Bonds was a much better hitter. David Ortiz weighted runs created plus in his career 140. Barry Bonds 173. 298 average, 444 on base, 607 slugging for Bonds. Ortiz 286 average, 380 on base, 552 slugging. Bonds' numbers just significantly better. Yes, towards the end, it just gets to a whole nother level, and it probably had a lot to do with performance-enhancing drugs. But I pointed this out yesterday on Twitter that Bonds produced more Fangraphs wins above replacement from 1986 to 1993 than Ortiz did in his entire career. Of course, Bonds played like 15 more seasons after that, and then went on to become one of the best of all time. In terms of Fangraphs wins above replacement, Bonds is second all time behind Babe Ruth and ahead of Willie Mays. So we're talking about an all-timer here. I don't have to tell you that, particularly those of us who, were there and able to witness the greatness. I mean, even if you didn't, even if you're younger and you kind of missed remembering what it was like to witness the great Barry Bonds, well, it was like Babe Ruth in the flesh. It was like nothing we've ever seen before, or at least in a very, very long time. He kind of just broke the game of baseball. He was far and away the best player of his, not just generation, but in people's lifetimes. And, certainly those of us who watched him play have never seen anyone come close. Even Mike Trout, for as great as Mike Trout is, what Bonds was able to do was just completely next level. So we'll continue having this conversation next. And eventually today we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit more about these meetings between MLB and the Players Association that took place on Monday and Tuesday of this week. So, some new reports coming out about what was discussed yesterday. So we'll get into that also next. But first, it's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. And Built Bar makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good you'll want to eat it, unlike other protein bars which can be chalky or waxy or taste like a chemical spill. You want to eat healthy, but it just gets so boring. Right about now, you might be thinking, this just isn't worth it. Where's the chocolate? Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and most Built Bars contain only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, to go along with a whopping 17 grams of protein. Go to BuiltBar.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. All right, here we go. We're going to continue talking about the sham that is the Baseball Hall of Fame. Man, not only is David Ortiz, is there a PED connection, but there's PED suspicions for Ivan Rodriguez, for Mike Piazza, and these guys got in easily as well. So the writers just had, and I keep saying the writers, but again, keep in mind 2/3 of the writers And there's a lot of voters. I actually don't know the exact number, but it's in the several hundreds. 2/3 of them are like, yes, put Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame. So kudos to them. I think maybe 75% in this day and age is a little bit of a high bar to clear, but that's kind of the point. They want it to be difficult. And they've spoken. They've passed their judgment on Bonds. And to me, they got it wrong, because the thing is, you just can't know from this era who was using and who wasn't. And it has more to do with likability than it does with steroid speculation to me, because it just has to do with how well you were at getting caught or not. That to me just doesn't fly. Like, I would vote for Alex Rodriguez. I would vote for Barry Bonds. I would vote for them all. But I do understand not everyone feels that way. But Bonds was just so much better than everyone else that you've just got to get this guy in. I mean, it makes me care less about the Hall of Fame than anything. I just think it's like an exclusive little club. The Hall of Famers don't want to let more people in. They want it to themselves. They put out that letter a couple years ago, right, that the Hall of Fame, that steroid users don't belong here. And they changed the rules from 15-year eligibility to 10. I just don't care anymore. And for me, it's an opportunity to just continue to point out the greatness that was Barry Bonds' career. And I mean, he's the GOAT. He's clearly the GOAT. He's the all-time home run king. And I just feel very fortunate that I was able to witness so many great moments of his throughout his career. So, I mean, the Fangraphs wins above replacement thing is a interesting argument to make. It's almost ridiculous when we look at it and look at how Bonds is second all time behind Babe Ruth by not a lot. And here's the thing. I think it was who was it? It was a pitcher who played for the Rockies, then the Yankees, and the Red Sox. I'm blanking on Adam Ottavino. When he, at some point, he said that if Babe Ruth was playing today, he would strike him out every time. And he took a lot of heat for saying that, but he's right. Okay, the game was different. And what the thing about wins above replacement is it compares you to your peers. And so Babe Ruth was that much better than his peers, as much as Bonds was better than his peers. But if you put Babe Ruth into today's pitching environment, yeah, he would probably strike out just about every time. That's how much the game has evolved. And so to me, because Bonds played recently and played, yes, pitching has gotten tougher in the last 20 years, but Bonds is far more contemporary, of course, than Ruth. So Barry Bonds, to me, there's a strong case to be made. He's the best player of all time, because Ruth wouldn't probably be able to perform well in today's game. So the argument is, okay, Bonds is second to Ruth, third is Willie Mays, and then like 182nd in Fangraphs wins above replacement is David Ortiz. Bonds has 164.4 Fangraphs wins above replacement in his career. David Ortiz has 51. So Jeff Sullivan, former writer at Fangraphs, current employee of the Tampa Bay Rays, pointed out that the difference between Barry Bonds' career WAR and David Ortiz's is Alex Rodriguez. There's an Alex Rodriguez size gap between Barry Bonds and David Ortiz. And that's not really supposed to be a knock against Ortiz, because Ortiz is one of the best DHs of all time, if not the best. Although I don't think he is the best. There's a case to be made for Edgar Martinez, who also got in, right? I'm not a Hall of Fame buff, but I believe Edgar Martinez got in the last few years. But anyway, A-Rod is also one of the best players of all time, but the gap between Bonds and Ortiz is A-Rod. So that's nuts. And I don't know, just the fact that you're shutting this guy out. Yes, there was steroid use. He became the face of it because he was so much better than everybody else, and because the media didn't really like him and he didn't like the media. But it was an era, right? Everybody pretty much was using. Was it right? No. And there's a lot of blame to be placed on Bud Selig as the commissioner for turning a blind eye for so many years as this was brewing and not clamping down on it in the beginning. So, and he got in the Hall of Fame, right, on his first ballot. I don't know, man. I'm just tired of the whole thing. The whole thing is double standards, and it's just wrong to me, and I don't like it one bit. So we're going to turn our attention at this point over to current baseball. How about, the 2022 season that hangs in the balance in terms of when is it going to start? When is spring training going to start? All of that is to be determined because we're in a lockout. So, God, the game of baseball right now is kind of shooting itself in the foot, in my opinion. You're keeping the best player of all time, arguably, out of the Hall of Fame. Look, the Hall of Fame is not it's not part of Major League Baseball. It's its own entity. It's a museum. And so I think Jeff Passan of ESPN said it really well, saying that the Hall of Fame functions best as a museum. And I agree with him. I mean, a museum of baseball without incorporating Barry Bonds is just a sham. It's ignoring history and ignoring greatness. Anyway, how did I get back on the Hall of Fame? It keeps sucking me in. I want to turn our attention to the 2022 baseball season. So we're in a lockout. The owners made a proposal about 2 weeks ago, I believe, and the players came back with a counter proposal on Monday, and the two sides met again on Tuesday. So yesterday we caught you up a little bit about what was discussed in those meetings, but we have some more details coming out today, or for you today, that came out yesterday. There was this bonus pool for pre-arbitration players topic that I think is really interesting. I think it has a big time flaw in it. They're talking about rewarding players based on wins above replacement. And what the two sides don't seem to understand, maybe they understand it but are still willing to go down this road, is that wins above replacement is like created and tweaked by different websites. It's not an objective number. It is something that they build and they make changes to. Like Fangraphs recently incorporated pitch framing into its WAR calculations for catchers and pitchers. They subtracted wins above replacement from pitchers that they gave to catchers for framing. And that changed a lot of people's numbers dramatically. Like Buster Posey, in his MVP season, he initially was said to have about 7 wins above replacement per Fangraphs. And when they finally incorporated pitch framing like a year ago or so, that season went up to 10 wins above replacement. So they make tweaks, and it's a formula that these websites have to come up with to try to best pin down a player's value. So it's not like saying batting average, which is indisputable, right? It's hits divided by at-bats. WAR is not like that. And you'll never hear me say that it is. That's why it's part of the conversation, and I think it does a better job than just about anything of trying to incorporate all the different ways a player contributes on a field: base running, defense, valuing different positions differently on defense, offense. But at the same time, it is not precise, and so I think it's a big mistake. So we're going to talk about what exactly was in this proposal in just a minute. But first, BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the #1 spot for all the sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new updated desktop and mobile website. To sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit, just use our promo code LOCKEDON, one word, to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, and of course baseball, right? Once baseball comes back, we will be telling you about all the opportunities at BetOnline. The over-under on the Giants last year, what was it, 76.5 or something? They went 107. So we'll have that for you at the time. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and the easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, here we go. We are going to talk about what went down, what was proposed during these back-to-back days of meetings between the Players Association and the league as they continue to try to reach an agreement so we can hopefully, maybe start spring training on time. I think there's almost no chance of that happening because, as we've talked about over and over, they're not going to feel the heat until there is heat. And the heat is going to come from the prospect of missed games. And I think that we're starting to run up against those types of deadlines. They probably have about 2 weeks before, if there's not an agreement, then spring training would be delayed. And personally, I just want to remind everyone, I'm looking forward to what's going to happen once an agreement is reached, because there's going to be a little bit of a frenzy with all these free agents left unsigned, and the Giants, they have money to spend. And so I'm going to be fascinated to see what they do exactly. I don't think they're just going to do nothing. I do expect some action, whatever it may be. But I look forward to that. Seiya Suzuki is still out there, and his kind of posting window is going to be closing as soon as the lockout ends. I think there's about 20 more days left in that window. He's reportedly coming to the United States to meet in preparation to meet with teams. So looking forward to that. But anyway, what else went down at these meetings? Well, the big thing for me was this pre-arbitration bonus pool. And so as I scroll to find the details of that, let's see, this is a long article. Okay, more interestingly, this is courtesy of MLB Trade Rumors. Major League Baseball agreed to the MLBPA's proposal for a bonus pool funded by central revenues to reward pre-arbitration players. Pre-arb players would be in line for bonuses based both on awards voting and reaching certain wins above replacement markers. That figures to present its own levels of complication, as there are multiple versions of wins above replacement. Beyond needing to agree on which form of WAR to set as the standard, the concept isn't likely to sit well with the proprietors of those metrics. Baseball Reference's Sean Foreman has already taken to Twitter to explain how uncomfortable he is with the notion of players being assigned millions of dollars based on a metric that is constantly undergoing slight tweaks to keep up with changes in the game. Additionally, as Sports Illustrated's Emma Baccarelli points out, there are some obvious potential conflicts of interest in tying pre-arb bonuses to awards voting that is conducted by the media members who cover those players. So yeah, I don't think that this makes any sense at all. I think that the concept of rewarding pre-arbitration players some extra cash based on performance is a good one, but to use awards voting and to use wins above replacement is extremely problematic because of what I said. These are not objective numbers. I mean, they attempt to be, but they are created by these websites and tweaked. And I mean, the example of framing that I gave is a good one, right? Because it dramatically changed WAR numbers for catchers and pitchers, and they just updated it at a certain moment in time. And so imagine the pressure a website like Fangraphs would be under if, they felt like they needed to make a tweak, but it was going to make a big difference in the numbers for some players. They would feel pressure about when to make those changes because it would affect these bonuses. They would feel potentially like they don't want to do it because of the pressure, and maybe they do want to do it to help certain players. I just think you gotta keep a separation of church and state here, just separation of Fangraphs and Major League Baseball. You just got to have a little bit of separation and checks and balances, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So if you want more details about what exactly went down during the meetings on Monday and Tuesday between the league and the Players Association, check out yesterday's episode. It is the main topic that we discuss in the first segment of the show. We get right to it. So the gist of it is there's no agreement, but it's a good thing that they're meeting. The players gave up some concessions. They gave up on their idea of getting players to arbitration before 6 years of service time, and they also dramatically reduced their request in terms of the dollar amount to cut revenue sharing. The league continues to say they won't touch revenue sharing and they won't touch getting players to arbitration sooner, but those are things that the players continue to push for. And in terms of the pool amount, the players proposed, this is the pool that rewards pre-arbitration players for, war totals. The players proposed a $105 million pool, and the league countered with $10 million. So a huge gap remains, but it is in fact very interesting that the league accepted the premise. So that's where we are. We will continue to provide updates all along the way. Coming up later in the week, we're going to be doing a mailbag, so look out on Twitter for the prompt. You can follow me on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick, to look out for that prompt and ask a question that we very well may get to on the next episode, either on Thursday or on Friday. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much, so thank you in advance. And thank you to everyone who's done so already. Please also like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. That helps me out a lot as well. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's show. I can't wait to be with you again one more time this week. You are now Locked On Giants.